Hello, everybody. So this is the last video in our Creating Histogram series. And in this video, we're going to talk about how do you create a relative frequency histogram. Now, in summary, a relative frequency histogram is a histogram that has percentages on the y-axis instead of counts. So we're going to begin by opening up our Chapter 1 Excel examples spreadsheet. And then I'm going to click on the tab that says Example 1.6, Relative Frequency Histogram. Now, if you don't see this, you can go ahead and toggle the left and right arrows until you see the spreadsheet, then click on it. Okay, so in Example 1.6 in the textbook, this is pages 26 through 27, we're looking at the Iowa State Vocabulary Test scores for 7th graders. And what I want to do is go ahead and create a relative frequency histogram for this data. Now, first things first, we want to go ahead and sort the data from smallest to largest. So what I'm going to do is click on the A1 cell and then highlight till I get all the way down. It'll take a couple seconds to the last value. Now there's 947, so it's going to take a second. Now, when I get to the bottom, my last entry should be the 948th entry. And the reason is because it started on the A2 cell. The number started on the A2, which means it's going to end on the A948th. Now, because there's only one column of data, I can right-click this, and then I can sort from smallest to largest. And didn't seem to do anything. So let me try this again. Right click, sort, smallest to largest. There we go. Okay, so our data is sorted. However, we're kind of in a pickle here because normally we need two things. We need the individual labels and the numerical values. Well, what's missing? We're missing the individual labels. So what I'm going to do is mouse over the A column and notice that there's a down arrow that appears. Click on that, and then I'm going to right click over it and select insert. And then I'm going to type in the A1 box student. And I'm going to bold that because that's going to be the label. Now the students here aren't labeled, so I'm going to insert labels for them. Now, let me show you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to number them like 1, 2, 3, 4. The reason is because that can confuse Excel. Excel might think that you're counting 2.1 once, 2.6 twice, 2.8 3 times, so on and so forth. So how do we remedy that? Well, instead of putting numbers, we're going to put a letter then a number. So because we're talking about students, I'm going to put S1 for the first, S2 for the second, S3 for the third, S4 for the fourth. Now you're not going to do this 947 times. Here's how you avoid that. Excel is smart enough to figure out the pattern that you're trying to do. So you're going to highlight those first 4 entries, and you see this little square here that it's appearing at the bottom. I'm going to click on it and drag down all the way to the last term. And it should label all the way to S947. And there we go. We have all the labels from S1 to S947. Okay. So now we're ready to construct the pivot table. So we have to highlight all of the data, including the individuals and the corresponding values. So this will take a second because again, there's 947 values. Okay. And then I'm going to go to Insert, Pivot Table. And then whatever I pre-selected, it inputs into the table range right here. And then I need to choose where it places the pivot table. So we don't want the pivot table to be in a new worksheet. Always put it into the existing. And I'm going to have it start the pivot table in the D2 entry this time. And after I click in there, it puts the information into the table range box, and then click OK. And we're going to start with an empty pivot table. Now remember, you're going to drop and drag the individuals into the values box and the data values into the rows box. In other words, students get put into the values box, the score gets put into the rows box. And now we have a pivot table to work off of. Click into the first row entry, then right click and go to group. Now, in the textbook, we choose to start this at the value of 2. So I'm going to type 2 in the starting at. Don't worry about the ending value because Excel will figure that part out. And we go ahead and determine that our class width or our bin width is going to be size 0.5. So I'm going to put that in the buy box and then click OK. And so now we have our pivot table. And we know our pivot table is correct because when you look at the bottom, it says grand total 947. Now, before we actually start creating anything, we need to make sure that none of the classes, which is the first column, or the bins skip over any. So 2 to 2.5, 2.5 to 3, 3 to 3.5. If we go through each and every one of these, we're going to see that no classes are skipped. So we're in good shape. However, at the moment, all it's showing is the pivot table with counts instead of percentages. So how are we going to convert those to percentages? Okay, well, I'm going to click in the pivot table in one of the entries, in particular in the first entry for the count, and then go over here to the side near the values box and click on the little I button here. Now, how do I make it show percentages instead of counts? You're going to click on this button that says show data as, and then the box that says no calculation, you're going to change that to percentage of column total, okay? So not percentage of, we're going to go to percentage of column total. And then I'm going to click OK afterwards. And then it changes all of the counts to percentages. And then it checks the answer by adding up the percentages, giving us 100%. Now, the percentages by default here is to the nearest 2 decimal places. So now we're ready to go ahead and create the histogram. So I'm going to start by highlighting all the data, including the first row, but excluding the last row here for the grand total. Go to Insert, then click on the column box and select the first picture that's right under 2D column. And this gives us a starting point for the histogram. Now we need to go ahead and edit this. That way all the bars are touching and it looks nice. So click on Design at the top. And as I stated in previous videos, don't select styles 4 or 5. I'm just going to select style 6. And then we need to input titles for the axes. So go to Quick Layout After, and you must select Layout 7. Okay, and this is way too scrunched up, so let me just zoom out a little bit. And now I'm going to change the titles here. And for the x-axis, we're going to put Iowa vocabulary test scores for 7th graders. And on the y-axis, this is going to be percent of students. And in parentheses, I'm going to put relative frequency. Okay. Now we need to make sure the bars are touching. So double click on one of the bars. And then over here where the tab that says Format Data Series, click on the series option, which is the bars touching. And where it says gap width, you're going to shrink that down to 0. So now all the bars are connected. I'm going to mouse over and click on the graph because I want to change the font size. It's just way too small. So go to Home, and I'm going to change the font size. Let's just say 14. And notice it's too scrunched up, so we're going to space it out some more, make it bigger. And there's our histogram, showing percents on the y-axis instead of counts. Now, the last thing I'm going to show you is how to calculate the center for this. So how do we calculate the center? Well, we're going to use the median command as we did in the last video. Okay, so what I'm going to do is type equals and then in capital letters median, open parentheses. Now we're going to put the first value. The first value is in the B2 column. So I'm going to put B2, capital B2, colon, and then the ending value, which was B, capital B, 948, close parentheses. And then when I do that, we see that the center or the middle score is a score of 6.8, which actually happens to be in the middle bar. Now that makes sense. Anytime that you have a distribution that looks roughly symmetric, you're always going to see the center fall into the right directly into the middle. Okay, so what I would like for you to do after this is the following. Delete your graph, highlight, delete the pivot table, select this information here, right click, and then clear the contents. And I want you to reproduce the graph and the center value. Okay, so if you guys have any questions, make sure to ask me on Monday after class or during office hours. All right, guys, take care. Bye-bye.